Welcome to Surviving Society.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Role of Love in Social Justice Work. I am joined by a dear friend of mine, Jaden, also known as Eerf Evil. Jaden is a youth practitioner that also happens to work in the funding part of the third sector. He's also a bad boy musician, rapper, artist, all-round G. And I am very honoured to be having this conversation with Jaden. Have I missed anything out, Jade? What other titles?
I think you've got it, man. It's a pleasure to be here, Ez. I'm excited, man. So, yeah.
Yeah, good, thanks. So, Jaden, I'm going to give a bit of context, bit of background to our relationship and kind of why I wanted to bring you on for this series. I met Jaden working at an organisation. I started working there, I calculated this about 9 years ago.
That's crazy.
Which is crazy. Capital C crazy.
Where's the time gone?
Yeah, it's crazy, mad. And yeah, Jaden started working there as well. Did you come for us to the icon
I
first?
was working there before.
All right, easy, Tiger.
I was the old, don't
all
do
right,
that.
Easy, Tiger. All right. So Jaden was there before me. I joined. And so we worked at this organisation together. My experience of that organisation was there was a lot of challenge and a lot of just stuff happening. It was a third sector organisation. There was a lot of stuff happening within that organisation at the time that I didn't like and that I felt challenged by. And I developed what felt like internal allies. So just people that have become that family in many ways. People that saw the work and social justice and youth work practice, saw it through a similar lens to me. People that sharpened my practice in terms of like what, how to think and operate, but how to marry the theory and the practice of this work. And I feel like why I wanted to have the conversation with Jaden is because his practice since I've met him till now has really just centers love, like exudes love, and everything that I've known him to work on, I think love really is central to that. I would argue as his friend sometimes to his detriment, but there is like just a real love-centered practice, I think, and as a black man that owns that walks in that, it's beautiful to observe, but I think there's also just a lot to kind of unpack and talk about in relation to that.
Yeah, I appreciate that as well, and it's love is a hard thing when you're thinking about this work, because it's also the thing that hurts the most at the same time. And I think I reflect back on mine and your time at the organisation, and what chimed was just really genuine people who were from that lifestyle. So we worked with a lot of young people experiencing conflict, and it's like we're from that background. And what I noticed was there's a lot of people who was working in that space who weren't from that background, who I felt were the hardest to work with. You know what I mean? And like, I think something that chimes like, and like it's shown now, like 10 years later, because I think I entered the organisation before you.
Yeah, you just said that, yeah.
I just started. 10 years later, we're still in the same field. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're still talking about what needs to change, and it's like, actually, I'm learning more about how do we apply the theory to what we're talking about. Like, how it's love is not enough. Do you know what I mean? It's like we have to do the works and we have to document the works. Like, which is why, like, when I didn't tell you this, but when you sent me this podcast and I saw the title of it, Love in Social Justice, like, there's something in the air right now, because I'm feeling a lot of magic, and I've got a story that I'll probably get onto later, which also alludes to love hurts at the same time as well. Do you know what I mean? And I think this is I'm learning to love, but also safeguard myself. Like Damien Junior Gong Mali says, it's like self-preservation is key. Do you know what I mean? Like, we can't do this work. We've seen a lot of our elders burn out and even pass away because of the amount of energy they've put in. And it's like, yo, like we're here for the, like Angela Davis says, we're here for the marathon, we're here for the long haul. So what is keeping us doing this work? Me and you have had a lot of conversations about bun this, man. Like, do you know what I mean? It's like sometimes I feel like the people that we're doing this for don't often see us, don't often see the work that we're doing. And it's like, and sometimes the people that are talking on behalf of our culture aren't doing the work. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, before we're even fighting the opposition, there's an internal war that we're not all on the same page with. And it's like, anyway, it's shaping my mentality for this conversation.
Yeah, so, no, you're saying some things, and that there were a few things in what you just said that I want to pick out. So my experience was very similar to you, that because we came from what is now framed a lived experience background, it wasn't that at that time. I think there was another buzzword for it. But what is now framed as a lived experience background, that was kind of our entry points into the work, and our motivations for doing the work. I feel that we were often on the same page. I think our priorities were also in the same place, which was at the time definitely for the young people that we were there to serve. That felt different to some of the other people that we were working with. And again, I say this with no shade, but I just think their entry points were different. Their understanding of this was different. Their love for the communities that the organisation was set up to serve, they didn't have an embodied love. Like they were figuring it out as they go. And that really showed up for me. I think we were both a lot younger then. And so the ways in which, I'll speak for myself, I chose to engage with that. I think I've gone on a journey on kind of self-love, and not necessarily requiring validation or requiring... Yeah, like at the time, it felt like I was on a bit of a rampage. There was always a thing. There was always something to like protest against, fight against internally. Again, if I'm talking within the social justice world, within that organisation, and I took up every fight. And now I'm in a place of like maturity, self-love, just being tired, being so committed to the work that I pick and choose my battles a bit more. But I do think that there is something about like those of us that have come from a place of lived experience, that come from the communities that we're working with, what love means to us in the context of this work might be different to people that have a different entry point.
And I think you said it, because it's like love for us means our phones won't turn off in the evening or the weekend. Love means like, I'm gonna do this whether I get paid or not, And I think that in the social justice space, there's a lot of organisations that will only do the work if they get the funding for it, or they'll develop a program based on what type of funding is out there. When a lot of our people, like you mentioned, lived experience, it's like my journey's coming into understanding. When we started in those organisations, I knew we had the same battles. We was fighting our knowledge being accepted or legitimised, and it wasn't seen as legitimate information. It was almost seen with a sympathetic gaze, like, oh, that's cute, and it's like, no, this ain't cute, like this is facts. And like, our approach was evident in the young people wanting to come to our programs or be around us, and it's like, actually by the end of our time there, it was like, it was shown within how the young people responded to us. And my journey's taken me into understanding a little bit more around that lived experience field. Like, I work at the Centre for Knowledge Equity, and it's based on like, how do we see lived experience as a form of knowledge production, where actually it is legitimized as much as a university degree. And I think the sector throw around terms that they don't really understand. There's a lot of lived experience funds. Like, I have to big up my my CEO Baljeet, because she put the language to what we was experiencing back then. And actually, when I read that report, the lived experience report that came out in 2017, 2019, it gave the language to what I've been trying to fight for, what we was fighting back then. It was like, this seems strange to me that we're having to fight to even work with the people that we want to work with and do it in a way that we want to do it. And it's like, I think about things like safeguarding and stuff now, when we want to work with our people in ways that are fit for purpose for us. I think about, there ain't no safeguarding policy that protects any youth workers with working with young people, right? And I say that being, there's contextual safeguarding, there's radical safeguarding, there's elements that are coming into play. but what communities get to have the time or resources to develop safeguarding? So something like love can be in the fold of their work, you know? It's often seen as something, oh, you lot are too emotional. And it's like, we're not emotional, we care. And that we care because they are us, you know? And often they don't see it like that.
And I do think there's something about there's something about learning to play the game. And that's like, I'm going to just name it live and direct here. There's something about, I think we met 10 years ago, roundabout. And I think the last 10 years, I've seen us both mature in our careers and just in life in general. And I think we've kind of learnt the game a little bit different. And we've learned, and I'll speak for myself, I've learned which part of this game I want to even play. So there's certain parts of this work and this world and this sphere of social justice as it exists today in the UK that I don't even want to part in, that I don't even want to be around that. I only want to be in the spaces that I can name love. I can name the importance of love. I can name that, like you said earlier, love isn't just the fluffy stuff. Love hurts, that love is boundaries, love is accountability, love is transformative, love is real. Like, it's not just like, oh, love the fluffy stuff, but it's like, actually, how do we do this really, really be in community? How do we really do the safeguarding? How do we really have these difficult conversations about how we heal post-harm, rupture and repair? Like, what are the frameworks that support that thinking? And that I think learning the game has supported me to like recognize that, oh, this is what, in terms of the sector, the social justice sector as it exists today, there is so much that it offers, and I don't want to take away, like, I don't want to discredit what it does do, because it does things, it definitely does. But in terms of the space that I'm in currently, I can only work from a place that is fully authentic, that fully recognises the need for care, that fully allows me to do the work the way it needs to be done, like without the red tape, without too much bureaucracy. And that is a way that centres love, that centres care.
And I hear that, man. Like, I think like it's like, I'm thinking about what do we see as social justice? Like, when I think about love in the social justice space, I think about our communities. I think about what we're doing right now. I think about like how we show up for each other, when and where like it always isn't attached to funding or a program or this, that, and the other. It's like love is like, and what you said about accountability as well. Love is also checking each other and being like, yo, like, I feel like in the sector, people are scared to challenge. Do you know what I mean? Like in the third sector, people are scared to challenge. But it's like, how are we gonna learn? Do you know what I mean? How are we gonna learn? Really, like, I'm not talking about evaluation and monitoring, because to me that still feels like surveillance. It's like, I'm talking about how do we learn as a community together, and like how do we show up for each other. For me, that's love. Like we the sector love a theme. Like they love like words like youth-led. They love lived experience. They love like reimagining. But it's like, but what does the work look like? What does community care look like? That's intuitive to us. I find that love is a very difficult when I think about social justice, because I see the two in two different spaces. Do you know what I mean? Which
I think is a shame. And that I think part of my motivation for doing this series, I think last year's one got feedback that it felt like there's an appetite. It felt like it resonated with people, that there are enough people, we're definitely not the majority, unfortunately, but there are enough people that are at the very least intrigued by the topic of like, how do we bridge the gap between social justice as it exists today in the UK and the practice of love? Like, how do we do that? And because when I think about that, like even what you just said, like, it resonates that like love and social justice feel there's a dissonance there, but there shouldn't be. Like, that's mad. It's mad to think that like love actually is central to justice. Like, justice and love to me go hand in hand, but when I think about what it looks like in practice, I think there is a dissonance, and I'm intrigued to look at like what it means to build movements, spaces, organisations, institutions, relationships that centre love. When I think about our relationship as an example, we've worked together formally for a small minority of our time of knowing each other. but actually we've cultivated a loving practice, one where we can check each other, one where we can celebrate together, where there's joy, where there's so many aspects to our relationship that allow it to be a loving space that informs the work. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, we're moving back into a space now where we're going to be working on things together more formally, which I'm excited for, which is sick. But that actually, the bulk of our time of knowing each other has been about a relational way of working that sharpens our practice. When I think about the role of love in social justice work, like I wouldn't still be here. There's a few of you that I can pinpoint that I met very early on in my career, that your practice, your way of existing in the world, what you put out there, how you hold me and how you've loved me, like really loved me. Do you know what I mean? Not like but really like outside office hours, you lot check for me, you lot are there, and I wouldn't still be in this sector if it wasn't for a few of you.
And Ez, like vice versa, because you're so special to this work, and it's like, I think this is what I was saying about, like, I see the two in different spaces. Sometimes I see social justice as connected to the sector, but I see love and our community and how we show up for each other as a normal thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't see it as social justice. I see it as you're my family. You know what I mean? My people, them are my family. I'm going to show up for them. And when I see social justice, it's like, and I get it, and I guess social justice is us, but I always connect it to the sector, to getting funding, to linking up with funders, and it's like, that's a process that I really hate, you know? Like, it's like, I want to be able to do this work with my people in a way that is relatable to our people. It doesn't have to be stale, you know? Like, why are some of the workshops we go to from like 9 till 5, and I'm like, everyone's almost sleeping at 5 o'clock? You know what I mean? It's like, why are things so stale within the sector? I don't get why we still do it a certain way. And like, and it's amazing to hear that Love It has such an appetite, like this conversation has such an appetite. And I find it like my nephew will ask me why all the time. Yeah, but why, uncle? But why, uncle? But why? And it's like, I find myself doing this in the charity sector, in the funding world. It's like, but why? But why? But why? And I feel like we're doing things based out of routine without really understanding why we're doing this, you know? Like, it's like, in the funding world, like, accountability is always placed on the community organizations to do everything. Like, here's an application, learn a new language to write for this application. Even though they ain't got capacity, they're working with their people there. Why is it not the other way around? Do you know what I mean? Like, why are not the funders doing more to reach out to the communities who are working with their people? It's like, things are in place right now within the social justice landscape that make it harder for us to show up in ways that we want to. Like, me and you, like, we've done so much work. We've crossed over so many times on so many projects. I know if I hit you up at any point, you'll be there, or you'll feed into a program or whatever if you've got the capacity to do so. And it's like, but a lot of the sector, unless they're getting paid, they ain't gonna do that. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of the sector, it's a relationship that needs something back, and it's like, love to me is unconditional. It's like, I got you, and I think we learn that. This is, for me, is a form of expertise. I think we get that from how our community care. Like, when my people them needed me when I was young, I was there. Like, no questions asked. I'm there, bro. I got you. And it's like, as we've grown up, it's like, there's more limitations on certain things. There's more, like, when we want to do this work, it's like, they make it harder to do this work with love. And for me, it's about fighting that. It's like, how do we, I don't want to beg for nothing. I don't want to beg for nothing from any funders. I don't want to beg for nothing from any other sector. But if there's resources there and they want to, like, for example, reduce youth violence, and we're working on youth violence, you lot should be supporting the organizations that are doing it. So, there's something in there where it's like, I'm with you. Like, the love is there in the communities, and I think that's what we get from our upbringing.
And I love what you just said there, because I do find this sector extremely transactional, like, to the point of no return. And I'll be honest in saying that even amongst people that are quote unquote like me, like, on paper, I think there is such a transactional nature to how people interact. There's like a kind of social climbing, there's a posturing, there's just a nastiness that early on I clocked and used to feel uncomfortable by, and soon tapped out of just completely. And I've maintained relationships with the people that I didn't have that with, that know there's genuine love and care. But there is something about, like, again, coming up in the sector, and like I've only ever worked in the third sector, social justice spaces. That's the only work I've ever done from a young child. When I think about it, so it's like that project led to that project led to that project, and before you know it, here we are. And so there's an element where I see how one can get institutionalized, or in the context of the sector, I see how one can find that transactional way of engaging around issues normal, like can normalize it, or even the extractive nature. So again, because my entry point was one of lived experience, I've definitely in the past been in places where I felt like I have to offer my story, or I have to offer, that's all I've got to give to a space. And I think, like you said, no, there are things that I learned from my environment growing up. There are things that I learned from how I exist, that I learned from how I exist in the world, about love as a skill. And actually the way that, like, we were reared in love, and that is like that feeds into all aspects of our work. And there's a skill in that. There's a skill in being able to be in relationship with people. There's a skill in being able to see people, truly connect with people. But then I think the flip side of that, and you've mentioned it already, and I'm just going to kind of bring it back in here. The flip side of that is that I think it's important. Yes, we've worked kind of from a lived experience place, and we care about community, and our phones don't go off, really and truly. But I think there's a point where something that I think the social justice space could adopt more, and particularly around conversations about love, is boundaries. And that actually, what are our personal boundaries? What are our collective boundaries? How are we talking about accountability? How are we talking about intersectional identities? So the way that actually, who are the people that tend to do more caring roles and responsibility? If we want food at events, who are the people that tend to cook? Who are the people that tend to be invited? Who's not in the room? Do you know what I mean? So I think there is the, like, kind of very natural way of being in community that is from a place of love, but then I also think we can go a step further and even challenge some of that, and think about how we can bring more, like, I'm going to use the word safety. It's not a word that I like to use, but how can we, no, it's not safety. How can we create space for everyone to care? That's it. That's it. Yeah.
And I actually agree with you, and like, just to track back to what I was saying, I was saying this is the people whose phones bell off over the weekend and stuff. Like, you're 100% right. Like, it's like, this was a past, and it's happened to, but it's a type of person, right? Mm-hmm. It's a type of person that the people that, like, there's two types of people. There's people whose phones buzz off in the evening. There's people who don't. And I'm just alluding to individuals who this practice comes to naturally, or this is like base their practice around. And one of the things that happens is the sector. You mentioned something about a little bit of competition, and it's like there's certain people within the space that might share the same practice, but then when funding and money comes involved, it kind of screws people's perspectives a little bit. And what the system of funding does, it creates more competition than collaboration. So it's like, even though me and you might be from the same elk or cut from the same cloth and be working in the same space, when it comes to a funding pot, we might be in competition with each other to get that funding, because there's not enough funding to go around. So that love turns into something different over time. And like, what people are forced to do within the space because of funding is they're forced to assimilate. So like you were saying, like, they're forced to become this thing because the system wants us to become this thing. And it's like, my question is, how do we do this work that is based on ways that we want to work? And like, I 100% agree with you with care. Like, our phones shouldn't be belling off, because we need to also rest. We need to preserve ourselves as well. But how do we create systems of care that is developed by us and not by the sector? How do we create that? How do we get the space, time and resources to start to think about solutions? Because often, and a lot of our people then are only funded for project delivery. Organizations, they don't get funded to like really think about the strategic side of things. And I'm talking about earlier stage and whatnot, but even some of the elders as well. So it's like, how do we move from a place of lacking to a place where we actually have the time and resources to be able to do that thinking that you're talking about? How do we implement this love into our work? Like, that's what I would love to see and be involved in terms of bringing that to life.
I think that's dope. And I think that really, as you were speaking there, I was thinking about just knowing you and knowing like you're a man of many hats, like you do lots of different things, and the theme for me that runs through all of them is social justice and love, in terms of how you approach what you do. So yeah, tell us a little bit about music and like your relationship between music, love and social justice.
You know, the two are inseparable. The two are one and the same. And it's like, when I was from a young age, I grew up in South Norwood in Croydon, and I had an older brother and an older sister. It was my brother that was a hip hop artist, and I always played football. I had a little bit of a spell at an academy. You don't know, everyone's a footballer these days. But it was like, so I was interested in kicking ball the most. So I wasn't really into the rapping or anything, but it was my brother who was rapping. And I remember at 16, I did my first cypher with the man them in the estate. And I love YouTube because there's footage of that. Do you know what I mean? Like, we documented the thing. And like, music just kind of stayed with me. Do you know what I mean? I grew up in church. My dad was a pastor in Brixton. So like, I didn't know that like music was always going to be a part of my life. And then when I started to read more around the age of 18, I fell out of football, and I started to think, like I actually have something here. And like, when we first did our first cypher, I remember like the man then was like, yeah, this is cold. And it was the first time I was like, yeah, you know what, I could do something with this. But growing up in the household that I grew up in, I didn't want to just rap for rapping's sake. I wanted to rap to continue telling our story of what's going on in our area, and do it in a way where it's like, man, there's more to life. Like there's so much more than what we're seeing, because I had always been exposed. I had different windows of perspectives from different people, and I was like, there's so much more to the ends. I love the ends. Do you know what I mean? Like, but like, we don't have to die in the ends. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, we can live, and like, we need to be the grandparents of the next generation. Like, we need to be the ancestors of someone else. So it was like, I knew that from an early age. So all I ever wanted to do was be able to feed back into my community, and be a part of my community. And if I've got words and I can string them together over a beat, then I'm going to be speaking to my community. And that's what it was, man. I use hip hop as a vehicle to share an alternative narrative of like, yo, like, yeah, there's so much more to this. There's so much more to this life. How do we continuously be fed by something different? And like, music and the movement, there's something that I'm working on right now that's like based around how do we put the moves back into the movement. And it's like, they shouldn't be siloed. And like, there's a whole nother podcast for you here where it's like, if we talk about the commodification of hip hop, which is like the most influential music genre in the world globally, and you look at the 90s and how it, like, where it stemmed from, how influential it was, and when brands got a hold of it, they knew that they could articulate a certain narrative. Anyway, without going into that, we fast forward to now, and like, we've got algorithms running things. There's partnerships with the YouTubes and the Spotifys and the major labels. So there's certain narratives that are going into our community. So for me, it's like, we just got to make sure that there's different narratives that are shared. I'm not saying that any narrative is wrong or right. I believe in the polarity of good and evil, and sharing everything that's coming out of the ends. But I believe like, if only one message is getting fueled, we're only going to get one answer. My brother took a young'un to the studio who's never lived a day on road, and like, he was about 11, 12, and like, every bar was a mad thing. Like, every bar was a mad thing that he spoke, and my brother asked him, yo, like, can you talk me through the bars, knowing that this kid hasn't lived a day on road, but he was referring to like what happens on the road in a dramatic style. And the kid goes, fam, I know I can blow off this. Do you know what I mean? Man's 11, 12, and he knows that like, rapping a certain way that might be detrimental to his own people is going to bring him an income. Yeah, I hear that. I hear that from him. I hear that, because if there's only one narrative that you can go down to make you that dough, I hear that. Not to say all the corruption, we could talk about all the corruption there, but if there's no alternative narrative, then our people, them are smart. We're going to go down one route. So for me, it's like, until we get another alternative narrative, and like, whether it's in the mainstream or we create our own alternative lane, and there's loads of conversations happening, people are popping up platforms, left, right, and center. There's so many ways to be like, yo, in the end, there's multiple identities. There's not just one. How do we create space for all of them? And that's why it's important for my music and my message to be connected to social justice.
And I like, so if hearing you say that, and then like knowing the music that you make, and like just the depth, consciousness, and it's just vibesy music. Like it's like good quality music. So there's something about, for me, and like you as a person as well, I think one of the things that this sector tries to do is it tries to tell you that you have to show up in a certain way. So I know lots of people that have like, it's almost like it encourages you to split your identity, to like be this version 9 to 5, and then any other kind of pursuits that you have, not to bring that into the space. But I think that you're an example of one of a few people that I think work very loudly in social justice spaces, but then also very loud about other pursuits and creative pursuits. And there doesn't seem to be a tension between those two things. And when I think about social justice movements, and I think about like you said, like we're at events and they're just boring, or we're talking and we're just theorizing, like we're just talking about theory all day long, but there isn't like movement, there isn't sound, there isn't vibrations, there isn't anything else. There aren't other offerings around how we are being together in the context of social justice. And when I think about love, social justice, there's just something really, like, I think for some people it might seem or appear to be far-fetched, but I think you're someone that is really living your practice, in that you are embodying like alternative, and I don't even like that word because alternative to what, but I think you're embodying authentic practice around like love, the movement, music, creativity, social justice, all of that comes into one. And that's one element of it. Then the other element, I see what you do in terms of the doors that you open for others that maybe wouldn't have opportunities to be platformed in the spaces that they are because of their music.
Again, like for me, we're living in a Western world. Do you know what I mean? So like how we do things has, like, say for example, wherever the money comes from. So we talk about systems, yeah. Wherever the money comes from, that's how they expect you to function, right? Mm-hmm. So until we create our own economic models or systems, we're always going to be playing the game that you spoke about earlier, which is like we're going to be dancing to whatever system is created or wherever we're getting funding from to do what we're doing, right? So that is the same in the music world. So we're dancing to whatever tune they want to fund, and that's the same with the social justice world. We're going to dance to whatever tune. And if you follow the money, and like we've done research pieces behind the scenes where we trace the money, and it's from the same source, do you know what I mean? And probably goes back to some type of colonialism or oppression of a particular community. Like, so for me, it's like both are so intrinsic to each other. And the questions that we're asking in music, like how do we create spaces for people who come from a particular background to share a critical analysis of their background, which is what I care about. To within the youth sector, it's that how do we support people who come from a particular background, who have lived the social justices that they're trying to address, and have tried to develop their practice, and both have a particular quality as well. It's not a lesser quality. Yeah. Like, it's like, for me, it's like community certified on both levels. So the music is community certified by the communities that are listening to it, and the programs that people are creating in the youth space or whatever are community certified by the people within their communities. But for some reason, they don't seem to get funding. Like, for some reason, they don't seem to get the attention that the mainstream labels or the mainstream charities get. So for me, I like the reason why I find it so, and it's taken me a long time to get to this point, but I'm singing the same hymn sheet, just about a different mechanism or vehicle for the same message. And if we look far back, like Nina Simone lived across the road from Malcolm X. Like, it's and when she started to dive into to the theory and to what was going on to her people, she couldn't not write about social justice. She couldn't not write about her people's injustices that they were facing at the same time. I, with the same level of knowledge like that I get from my phone, that everyone else gets, don't know how people do not talk about it in their music. Apart from, I can only assume that certain things don't get the same attention by whoever is in a position of power to put it through your airwaves. You look at the news, you look at media outlets, like you just follow who owns these platforms that we want to be accredited by or we want to be certified by. And it's like, every day I'm like, it's making less sense and less sense to be in these spaces, because I'm like, I just want to be with my people and I don't want to see my people die. Is that something like, that's not mad, you know? Like, that's a normal thing. So I do not understand how people are not on the same wave. And like, for me this year, it's about like our people staying charged up through the music. So how we can use music to charge up our people, so that we can get something out of it, so that we can stay liberated. Like, what does liberation mean to our people? And music, for me, I had a realization this year, music and nature are going to be the two things that save our people. Like, young people aren't even going on residentials no more, because they're stuck in this concrete jungle. And why? Because of safeguarding. Because the young person says he wants to bring his weed. Fam, your youth worker smokes weed, blood. Like, what do you mean? Like we're done by these unwritten laws. It's like, I'll tell a youngin', if I had a project, I'll tell the youngin', bring your weed. I'm going to take you up the Brecon Beacons and see if you want to smoke the weed at the other side. You're going to be asleep in your tent, blood. And even if you did want to smoke your weed, like, like you're in nature, fam. You know,
not killing no one.
Like, but so like, it's like my question to the sector and to people is like, they're always complaining about the risk of doing, but my thinking is the risk of not doing is greater than the risk of doing. So I always think about things as, it's not about the risk of doing. Let's mitigate that. Let's work with that. Yeah, and let's be open and honest and transparent. If the young person wants to bring his weed, let's have a conversation about that. But let's not do it because of that. Because the risk of not doing is that young person doesn't have a perspective or an additional window or life experience that's going to give him by coming out into nature. You know.
Yeah, and like so much in what you just said there, and I think some of the main points I picked up were what you're saying is happening within like music industry and like the limitations of people being able to create freely and share social justice concepts or messages, and how that isn't what's kind of seen or funded. I think on the flip side, I think in social justice spaces, again, like you said, just repeating the point, that creative forms of expression, alternative avenues of knowledge creation, like music, like podcasting, like theatre, that actually are creating, that it's a different form of knowledge production. And who is it valued by? Who is it accessible to? When I think about this conversation and these conversations, like podcasting is something I love doing. I love coming and just talking and thinking through together. Why is this not seen as valuable as other forms of knowledge production? So when I think about it from that angle, and I think about, it feels like to me, love and social justice require a level of openness and flexibility. There isn't a one size fits all. There isn't a one way to do it, but actually it's being in the practice of being able to be responsive to what's showing up and what's coming up for whatever that moment requires.
I think so, and who gets to define it? Do you know what I mean? And for who? Like, it's like we're often doing like, love is what drives our work. Like, we can't do any of this without love. Do you know what I mean? And it also keeps us going.
I'm going to pause you there, because I think you can do it without love, but I just don't think you can do it well. Like, I'm around people that do it without love, but they don't do it well.
I'm sorry. Talking from the eye. I couldn't do this work without love. You know, I don't know what drives other people. But I know it's not love, so I fundamentally agree with you. But I couldn't do this work without love. And I think so often, like, again, like, just to reiterate the point, I think it's like people like us that are from the communities that we're from, don't often get seen in the same way as like someone that's running a big CEO organization with staff members and is a mainstream charity. And it's like, actually, again, it's like, yo, do we want to be a part of that system where we're continuously fighting for validation for our work, for who we work with, and how we work? Or do we create new ways of doing things? Like for me, it's like, how do we create a new economy to fund this work? We've got enough. I'll offer an example of people that I know, enough footballers and rappers that I know personally that could set up a new fund that could fund their brethren who have youth organizations to work with their young people, you know, but who's telling, like, who's actually giving them, who's telling them, like, they're setting up their things, but who's advising them? It's usually based on, like, we still don't, it's like the sector legitimizes certain things, and we also follow suit with our thinking as well. Like, we need the culture to start to acknowledge each other. We need to acknowledge each other and say, yo, this is important to share this message between our community. So how can we find ways of our community supporting each other, and like little bits of funding where the man them or the sisters them have made a little bit of money? How do we bring that back into our community? There's a book by my boy Nabil called Privatize the Mandem, and he's brought out legislation around how the Mandem can buy their block back. And it's like, yo, we've got thinkers now. We got that we're thinking, you know. And it's like, but we need everyone. Like, we need to stop beefing each other. This is where this country's got as an estate, where the right and left, yeah, like the fascists have a common goal. Let's get migrants and refugees out of our country. Let's get people of colour out of our country. So they, no matter all the politics, you could be rich or poor, mad conservative, or like, do you know what I mean, no income, whatever. But you all agree on, like, let's get these people them out of our country. Yeah? So they've got a common goal. So they're growing in numbers, and they're growing in numbers globally. Like, you see it in Italy, you see it in France, you see it in Germany, you see it in Canada, you see it with Trump. So it's like, yo, this is a mad thing, yeah? They might not agree on a lot of things, but the main thing they agree on, over here on the left, whether we call it the left or whatever, like, everyone's fighting each other. You know what I mean? There's no shared common goal that we're all trying to chase and achieve, so that we're all beefing each other, rather than, like, imagine we loved each other and said, yo, like, how can we come together? We might not agree on everything, but do you lot know, like, up north, you lot are getting oppressed by the same people we are. Like, if we actually knew the power we had and came together, then that's when we'll be able to address all these things that happen. It's a system. Since flipping the kings and queens days, like, it's a system that continues to oppress us. Do you know what I mean? Like, people of colour, the working class, like, do you know what I mean? Like, we're all oppressed by the same system. So it's like, until we're Fred Hampton, yeah, like, who was only 21 when they duppied him, was trying to build a thing called the Rainbow Collective, which was trying to bring the Black Panthers, the Puerto Ricans, the white working class all together through the breakfast clubs. They knew they had to duppy him. You know what I mean? 100 bullets through his door came in and executed him properly. Like, they knew that with that level of, like, charisma and knowledge, he was going to be a problem. So, like, they duppied him. So it's like, yeah, what I'm saying is a bit of a mad thing, but
no,
like,
it makes
we come together. Yeah.
No, I'm saying it makes perfect sense, and I think that's come up already in this series about the efficiency of the right and the efficiency of kind of fascist thinking, and how there is a united goal. And when I think about love and social justice, there's something about us. The common goal for me should be love. Like, it should be love, and it should be like us all recognizing that freedom looks different for everybody, but we all deserve it. Liberation, what is that? And how do we, and that to me is why the conversation about love explicitly needs to be being had, because there is so much difference amongst us in terms of social justice world and social justice space, but love should be, in my view, the unifying force, the unifying factor that supports us to move this work and these movements forward.
If for me, as long as your liberation looks like I'm free also, like, as long as my counterpart's liberation and love wants me to be free as much as them, then I'm with it. You know what I mean? Then it's love. But if if
it's
another
one way.
person's liberation means someone else has to be oppressed, then it's not love for me, you know? And it's like, we see that often. It's like, yo, people are fighting for causes, but they don't want me to be free. They just want to be free themselves. Then it's not the same. Even when we talk about, there's so much, anyway, like, liberation for me is we're all free, you know what I mean? Not at the cost of another person.
Thank you for listening to Surviving Society.
To support our work, you can rate,
review and subscribe. To host or produce a series of Surviving Society,
get in touch with us via Twitter or Instagram.